All right, Baruch Hashem, it is our second to last class of 30 letters in 30 days. It's letter number 29. Before we start learning, we're going to give tzedakah with our Kailo Chabad Pushka app. Remember, the whole point is that we're giving the Rebbe a birthday present by learning Torah, by learning the Rebbe's letters, but also we are giving tzedakah. That's combine the two, the learning and the doing. Why not? Okay, we just want to remind everybody that tomorrow night, 9 p.m., same regular time, but we will not be live streaming from this studio, which is the old SoulWords studios that you've come to know and love, but we will be at the new, God willing, we'll be at the new SoulWords house, half a block from the aisle. There will be an in-person crowd, but that's already maxed out at capacity. There was a link for, it's a women's event. I think I had the space for 50 women, and I think that's all those spots are taken. If there are any cancellations, I guess we'll change the website to reflect that. So maybe check the link to see if a spot opens up. But right now it's at maximum capacity. We will be raffling off a complete set of Igros Kodesh at the women's event tomorrow night. That's for people who actually are coming to the event. And also after the event, we will go to the aisle with a report of those who attended the live event. If you're getting FOMO and you're like, oh, I want to go to the live event, God willing, we will have other live events at the SoulWords house. That's what it's there for. That's why we made a SoulWords house. In other news, make sure to, if you want the 4 cups Haggadah, recovery Haggadah, if you know someone who might enjoy a recovery-themed Haggadah that's really based on Chassidus, get the 4 cups Haggadah. We'll put the link in the YouTube description. Oh, speaking of YouTube, subscribe to my SoulWords YouTube channel because we're almost at 100,000, and then I get a cool silver plaque from YouTube, which we'll put up, God willing, at the SoulWords house. Okay. Anything else? We gave tzedakah. I mentioned tomorrow night's live in-person event for women. I mentioned we're raffling off a whole set of Igros. I mentioned the Haggadah, 4 cups Haggadah. I don't think there's anything else. Let's get to tonight's letter. Here we go. Got to open it up. I thought it was open already. Okay. This is from Chelik Yud Aleph from volume 11 of the Igros. Letter 3,396. Baruch Hashem Ches Nissen, Tavshin Tes Vav, Brooklyn, New York. It is from Ches Nissen. Just, tonight just became Yud Nissen. So, it's this time of year. And it does talk about Pesach. And yes, that's one of the reasons why we chose this letter. Brooklyn, New York. Mar Bentzion Dinur. Who is Bentzion Dinur, or Dr. Bentzion Dinur. Shalom Uvracha, greetings and blessings. Bentzion Dinur, or Dinberg, was a politician, a member of the very first Knesset. He was later the Sara Chinuch, the Minister of Education. And his story is, unfortunately, I would call it a tragic story, similar to last night's letter, the letter to Rebbe Eliezer Steinemann, the author, the writer, the thinker, who I don't like using this word because it's an inherently derogatory term, but it is accurate. There's a category of Shana Upirish, somebody who once learned and then abandoned Yiddishkeit, which is very, very different than someone, well, for sure different than a Tinnik Shenishba, someone who was raised ignorant of Judaism. But I'm saying even it's different from someone who was, they were raised within Yiddishkeit, but they never really became immersed as far as studying. They were never a Talmid Chacham in any respect, but someone who actually had deep knowledge of Torah and then left. That's it's not such a good thing. I don't have to elaborate on that. And it's tragic. And of course, if you know the history of the 20th century, you'll know that a lot of that happened. And you'll know that the Rebbe not only dealt with that from the perspective of a global movement, sort of, on the universal scale of things, trying to stave off the influence of secularization and modernization, but on a very, very personal level, the Rebbe had these connections, these relationships to people like we learned about last night, Eliezer Steinman, and tonight, Bentzion Dinur. So Bentzion Dinur actually came from a Chabad family, although, interestingly enough, he at first did not learn Temchet Timimim, although later he did. He first learned in Litvische yeshivas, like actual, not like we use the term Litvish today, like actual Lita in Lithuania. He learned in Slobodka, and he was in Vilna, and later on he came to Lubavitch, the actual Lubavitch, the town Lubavitch, and he learned in Temchet Timimim. And apparently he already had become enamored with some of the secular ideas of the time. He had difficulty towing the line in Temchet Timimim. He had what we'd say problems with Kabbalah soil, which is interesting when you read this letter that the Rebbe wrote to him. And he left Temchet Timimim, he left yeshiva against the express directive of the Rebbe Rashab. He wasn't thrown out. To the contrary, the Rebbe Rashab wanted to keep him, and he left anyway. And he left Yiddishkeit, and he, So that's the story. That's the story. Now, what's interesting is, so you see that Rebbe has a relationship with him, and it's a warm relationship, and it's a respectful relationship. And you could say, well, what choice did the Rebbe have? This guy was Sarah Chinuch. He was Minister of Education. He was a useful contact. And that's true. And the Rebbe did make sure that the Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael had a connection with Dr. Dinur because of his position and because of how it would benefit chinuch for Jewish children, and how it also, I'm sure you've heard of the Reshet, the network of schools, of Lubavitch schools, the Ole Yosef Yitzchak network of Lubavitch schools. So that was obviously that received direct benefit from the relationship between Chabad and Dr. Dinur. But it's deeper than that. There's clearly a personal connection as well, and there's a warmth, and there's a love. And, there are many things we can learn from this letter, tonight's letter, but just one of them is an example of how our Rebbe relates to someone who is not just not currently Torah observant, but someone who willfully abandoned the way of Torah observance. So let's look at that, shall we? Okay, I made a bracha earlier, l'chaim. When I say l'chaim, I feel like I have to clarify what I'm drinking. This is Coke. This is actual Coke, not Diet Coke. It's like actual Coke. Because I bought a bunch of little cans of Coke to put in the fridge at the SoulWords house coffee room. There's like a little coffee room /den/library. You'll see it when you come to the SoulWords house. So I had to buy a bunch of little Cokes, the little ones like this big. So this is what that is. I'm sure you're all very fascinated to hear about this. Okay. Michtove niskabel v'za'at niskabel gam sifrei b'mifne hadoros v'tach al churasezu. I received your letter and just now your book called B'mifne HaDoros, At the Turn of the Generations. Thank you for this gift. So first of all, the Rebbe is thanking Dr. Dinur for his book. It's not a sefer. It's not about learning. It's some scholarly work. And yet the Rebbe is showing appreciation. Now, I don't think just to be polite, by the way. I think that the Rebbe was expressing some type of validation that the work was worthwhile to some extent. Which that itself is, you can learn a lot from, because here's somebody who was capable of learning. He was learning in Temchet Tamimim, and just the fact he was even admitted to, I don't know how big of a Talmid Chacham he was, but if he was admitted to Temchet Tamimim, it was some type of a Talmid Chacham. And he should have, by all rights, should have been writing Svarim, right? If he wants to write something. And it was the Rebbe told him, I received B'mifne HaDoros, and I liked it, I appreciate it, thank you. Ubetach b'hamshech l'sichasenu, certainly in connection or continuation with our conversation, and when it says l'sichasenu, our conversation, I assume that means Yechidus. I assume that means that he visited the Rebbe. Yinam li lekabel gam shor and yonim mudpasim shalai ubefrat Yisrael b'goyla v'oid v'tach l'mafreya. I would, so in continuation of our conversation, it would be nice for me to receive all of some of your, I don't know if to say all, but your other works that are published, especially, and the Rebbe gives a specific title, Yisrael B'Goyla, Israel in Exile, and others. And thank you in advance. So, this is more than just the Rebbe saying, I received a book that you sent to me, thank you. This is the Rebbe saying, and by the way, send more, and here's a specific title of a specific book that I would specifically like to see. So I would take that as real encouragement, like serious encouragement. Now, I didn't have the opportunity to look, to be ma'ayin, to look closely into the Sefer, the one that you sent me, B'mifne HaDoros. But I didn't want to delay my letter any further because Chag HaMatzos, the time of our liberation, is upon us. It's coming. And I wanted to give you my blessing of chedus, of freedom. Chedus amitas, true freedom. Chedus medaiges beruch medaiges begeshem. Freedom from worries of the material sort and materials of the spiritual sort. Chedus mimitzrayim mimitzarim agvulim. Freedom from limitations and boundaries. Umekol davar ma'akiv bechaya Yehudi Hashalom, and anything that is an obstacle against living a true Jewish life. It's a beautiful concept here. The Rebbe is saying, by all rights, I would have wanted to write to you after I've properly gone through your Sefer, or your book, whatever you want to call it. But I didn't want to miss the opportunity. The Zman Chedusenu is coming, and the Zman Chedusenu is a time where Chedus is in the air, and I want to channel some of that and give you a bracha of Chedus. It's a beautiful concept. Like, there's a power in the time of year. This is the Jewish and specifically Chassidish concept of time. That when a time comes around, the same energy that was available in the world the first time, which actually precipitated that event that we're commemorating, that energy is in the world again, and in fact, in a more powerful way, in an even more powerful way than the first time. That's how Chassidus explains it. So the Rebbe says, I didn't want to miss the opportunity if I can bench you with chedus, and the Rebbe goes into so specifically what kind of chedus. Chedus from worries of material concerns and worries of spiritual concerns, and chedus from any limitations that would hold you back from a true Jewish life, a complete Jewish life. Gorgeous bracha. Okay. And we understand the guy's not frum. Okay, you understand that. All right. Ulamaiser lahoyer, ubefrat chavose. Now, it would be superfluous to explain, to comment, especially for someone like you. What does it mean, someone like you? Someone who you're familiar with these concepts. You learn Temchet Tamim. You're a Tamim. Like, you know what I'm talking about here. I can use shorthand with you. Asher cherus gufnis loy rak she'ena tachlis bifnei atzma ve'ena ela hachshala cherus hanefesh ukeloshen hakosov be'etziacha es ha'am mitzrayim ta'avdonas Hashem ala har hazeh. Physical freedom, not only is it not an end unto itself, and is rather only a preparation for spiritual freedom. Or like the verse says, describing, Hashem is speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu, and this is before Moshe even goes to Paray, to say, let my people go. Hashem says, I'm going to take out the Jewish people. I'm going to remove them from Egypt so that they can serve me on this mountain. In other words, I'm going to take them out of slavery to Pare so that they can receive the Torah to become servants of Hashem. So, yeah, you have to be brought out of Mitzrayim in order to be brought to Har Sinai, but to just be brought out of Mitzrayim and then not be brought to Har Sinai, I know we say Dayenu, but the point is just to have physical freedom without it being translated into spiritual freedom, what's the point? And you understand, I mean, I guess I'll spell it out, but, the Rebbe is writing to someone. Again, you have to think about the terms, the 20th century, the allure of nationalism and secularism and enlightenment. And someone like this, Dr. Dinur, who he was a member of the first Knesset and he was an associate of Ben Gurion, and he bought that whole vision of this. What is freedom? What is autonomy? It's political self-determination and the whole line, right? Devoid of Yiddishkeit. So the Rebbe is saying to him, it's like, okay, so you're a guy who grew up in the old country, right, with the pogroms and the persecution, and I know exactly what it is. The Rebbe is saying, I grew up with that too. Okay, and now you're in Eretz Yisrael, and now supposedly free, but like, what does free mean? Like, free to live a Jewish life. Are you living a Jewish life? So, physical freedom unto itself it's not a tachlis. Is that what the Rebbe said? Yeah, she'ein a tachlis b'fnei atzma. It's not a tachlis. It's not a goal. It's not an end game. But is it worthless? It's not worthless. It has a role. It's a hachshara. It's a preparation. Or you can even if you want to phrase it even more strongly, you could say it's a prerequisite. You could call it even a prerequisite, although I don't know if it is necessarily a prerequisite. But physical freedom has its place, but only as a means to an end, not as the end unto itself. Such an important concept, both in this context of the ideology of Dr. Dinur and his cohorts, and also I think today, it's we have different isms and different ideologies that are alluring in different ages and different times, but we can all relate to this idea of pursuing physical freedom as an end unto itself, and the trap that is for the Jewish people. Okay, so ela shagam loy titochen cherus kipshuta ela im kain kshura becherus hanefesh. There can be no literal freedom, simple freedom in the simple sense, without spiritual freedom. V'loi titochen cherus hanefesh kolash nechsidis afilo cherus hanefesh abames ali im ken kshura im he becherus hanefesh olakis. And there can be no freedom of even the animal soul until there's freedom of the godly soul. So even the animal soul is a slave, even if it thinks it's free. Free to do what? Freedom to what? Freedom to go to the beach? Freedom to order whatever you want on Amazon? That's freedom. Freedom to order a pizza. There can be no freedom even of the animal soul until there is freedom of the nefesh elokis, meaning that a Jew is living in alignment with his spiritual mission and calling, which is to serve Hashem. And it is tragic if you think about it, because, you're talking about someone like Dr. Dinur, a big thinker, an idealist, a dreamer, who really, really wanted this idea of freedom, not just for himself personally, but as a proud Jew. He wanted freedom for the Jewish people. And it is sad to think about how they pursued a sort of hollow and meaningless type of freedom, which is no freedom at all. Even the animal soul is not free until the godly soul is free. Let's continue. Ki b'melchemes hayitzarim harei lo'olam lo yikabel haruach moros hachaymer v'lo yiyeh kofaf loi el l'shah v'lo yashli mitei b'lev shalit. Very interesting statement here. In the war between the inclinations, between the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, the spiritual will never accept the authority of the material and can only be subjugated to it temporarily. Meaning, even in cases where the spiritual is subjugated to the material, it is only temporarily. And it will never accept it with a full heart. The spiritual will never be vanquished. It will never give up. It will always yearn for what it yearns for, even when it's temporarily squashed by the material. Masha'en kain, that's not so, though, if you flip it in reverse. Kisharuach misgaber al hachaymer, when the opposite happens, when the spiritual triumphs over the material, menatzchei nitzochen gomer, and completely wins over it, hainu leirak mitech hachreach ala gam mitech hakara sheken tzarich liyes shachaymer yekaf of a betach leharuach. Not just where the spiritual is forcing the material, but where the material comes to recognize that this is right, this is the way that it needs to be. Oz dafka soirer hashalim ba'elam katan zeh adam. That is exclusively when peace will reign in the microcosm that is man. It's very interesting. The material can be subjugated to the spiritual, but only temporarily. And never, and inwardly, the spiritual will never give up. It'll never really submit. But if you flip it, the opposite is not so. When the spiritual dominates the material can become completely dominated by the spiritual. The material can completely surrender to the spiritual. And in fact, that condition is the only true peace that a person can have. And if you think about it, if the spiritual can never really be dominated, it always yearns for what it yearns for. It wants elokus. It wants to be close to God. So even when it's being suppressed, when a yid is not living a life of Torah mitzvahs, there can be no peace. How could there be peace when the neshama still wants what the neshama wants? However, if the neshama dominates the guf and the nefesh habamis, then the guf and the nefesh habamis could actually, ultimately, ideally, come over to the side of the neshama, and then there would be peace because everyone's on the same side. Because you know what could happen? The material, meaning the body and the animal soul, can become refined and can actually become transformed to a vessel, to a vehicle, to express the will of the spiritual. That's the ultimate state, where the soul wants the mitzvah and the body does its bidding. The body acts as the vehicle to carry out the mitzvah. This part is, I don't know, this is powerful. I mean, if you think about, this is somebody who was in Teim Chitamim by the Rebbe Rashab. He saw the Rebbe Rashab. He left for what he thought were greener pastures. Tragically, I think it's tragic. He was pursuing what he thought was freedom. You know, if you think about it, the Rebbe's tone here is so loving and compassionate and forgiving. Because if it were anyone else, I think they would write to him as, you're a defector. You betrayed us. Like, you made your bed, go lie in it. Yeah, you're unhappy, you're unfulfilled. Okay, well, you got what you chose. You got what you were looking for. And the Rebbe is not only writing with such compassion, but letting Dr. Dinur know that he can still choose the right thing. He can still choose the right thing. And explaining to him that the difficulty he experienced as a young man, it's not an imaginary difficulty. There is a certain challenge in submitting yourself to Hashem. There is. But it's part of a process, and you have to allow yourself to go through that process. And it's almost like the Rebbe is saying to this guy, you never really went through your spiritual maturation process. Like you avoided it. You sidestepped it and you ran away. But let's come back and let's do what you should have done when you were a bacher. That's how I'm reading it. Read this. Okay. So, yeah, the beginning of the process is you have to be mekabel oil. You have to accept authority, which is where he got hung up when he was a bacher. He couldn't deal with that. He couldn't subjugate himself to the authority. Aval achrisa, but the end of the process, sipuk nafshi v'cheres hamitis. It's deep spiritual fulfillment and true freedom. So you went running after false freedom because you couldn't go through the temporary imposition of Kabbalah's oil. But if you can go through the initial discomfort of having to submit to a higher authority, it doesn't stay uncomfortable. It doesn't remain that way. Ultimately, what do you achieve? You come to, let me just make sure I get the words right because they're beautiful words. Sipuk nafshi v'cheres hamitis. Spiritual fulfillment and true freedom. Kolosh Teres Hachsidis, or like Teres Hachsidis uses the expression, and this is a paraphrase from Megillas Esther. Hanefesh alakis tamen he. It says mana. It should say omna itoi with an aleph. There should be an aleph there. I don't know if that's an artifact from the original Igrus. That the godly soul is always in a covenant, in a faithful covenant with Hashem. Esther remained faithful, loyal to Mordechai, even when she was in the palace. The neshama always remains loyal to Hashem, even when it's in the body. So you have to know, like we were saying before, the soul can never truly be dominated by the body. It will always yearn for what it yearns for, closeness to Hashem. and it will give you no peace. Even if you try to subjugate it, you won't, because it cannot forsake Hashem. The neshama always wants Hashem, right? So here's the deal. The real peace and the real satisfaction, sipuk nafshi, and the real freedom, the cheres hamitis, all of that stuff is going to happen when you finally just recognize that the soul has never given up. Understand that the Rebbe is writing to somebody. I don't know. I mean, you can see pictures of him. He's not wearing a yarmulke. I don't know how secular he was. I don't know which things he kept or he didn't keep. But you're talking about somebody who outwardly, completely secularized. And the Rebbe is speaking to him and saying that your soul never stopped wanting what it has always wanted. And this, that you felt the discomfort of Kabbalah soil as a young man, and therefore you ignored your soul. Your soul didn't stop wanting what it wants. And go back and just be makabel oil, and I promise you, you're not going to be miserable. You're going to be so fulfilled. You're going to be so happy, and you're going to truly be free. Yeah, let's continue. So if you start off by accepting the yoke, a yoke, like you put in an animal. But you'll graduate from iskafia to isapcha. At first, it's iskafia, subjugation. But then it becomes isapcha, transformation. The negativity, not only is it held in place by the positivity, but the negativity actually becomes co-opted by the positivity and becomes part of it, becomes subsumed within it. And in fact, that is the entire purpose of man. That is the entire purpose of man, to bring about that subjugation and ultimately transformation. Yes, it starts with subjugation, which is not pleasant, and maybe that's what you ran away from when you were a younger man. But if you'll just continue the process, you will come to the Isapcha. And by the way, you can learn Tanya, and Isapcha is Avedas HaTzadikim. And you can say, who's going to get to that level? You know what? Our Rebbe is telling this guy who's not frum, you will get to the sweet Isapcha. You will get to the Sipak Nafshi V'cheres Hamitas. You will get there. And this is very, very, very characteristic of the Rebbe's teachings in general. That the Ava B'Tanugim is not just for tzaddikim. That there is a sweetness and there's a pleasure and a personal satisfaction in serving Hashem. Yeah, at first it feels like a personal betrayal. I want to do what I want to do. I want to pursue what's meaningful to me. I don't want to have to do something that I'm being told to do. Yeah, and at first it's uncomfortable. But ultimately, the truest personal satisfaction comes through being loyal to our soul. Because the soul's never going to give up. The soul's not going to stop wanting what it wants. If you can't beat them, join them, right? Okay. Maybe that's a cynical way of saying it. Sorry if I'm being overly flippant. I think this is a powerful, powerful, powerful letter. Just trying to lighten the mood, maybe. Okay. V'asayim bivracha hamasartis. I'm going to conclude with the traditional blessing. I don't know why. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but like the traditional blessing, like the good old fashioned blessing. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. At any rate, I'm going to, I could have said the customary blessing, the traditional blessing. I'm going to conclude with the traditional blessing. B'birkas Chag HaPesach Kosher V'Sameach, with a blessing for a kosher and happy Pesach. And I wish to all of you and to me, to all of us, a kosher and freilich Pesach. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow night, Emetz Hashem, for our Yud Aleph Nissen event and our 30th letter.